Hey, Pittsburgh. There are some incredibly creative people around our city, and we're here to meet them, learn what they do, and how they create. I'm Alan Fear, and this is the Pittsburgh Creators Podcast. I'm super excited to have her on. I want to welcome Carla Cardello. For our audience who might not be familiar with you or your work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you create?
Sure. So as he said, my name's Carla. I am mostly a photographer. I do both city and food photography. For the city side, I walk around Pittsburgh capturing the streets and bridges and sharing that. And then on the food side, I do food photography, and I also develop the recipes and do the food styling for that.
Now, in doing a little research, the one thing that I thought was really interesting is you went to culinary school and you also have a multimedia degree. Can you talk a little bit about what inspired you to take that academic route for those two things and what that process was like for you?
Sure. So yeah, I went to Slippery Rock University for my multimedia degree, and I started out in video. And then while I was in college, I started a food blog, and I was working on that, creating the recipes and photographing the food for fun. And then eventually I found out video wasn't the right medium for me. And at that point, my food blog has grown. And right now I'm a full-time freelancer. So I do a lot of client work. And then eventually, since I was doing the recipe stuff more seriously, I did an online culinary course and got my degree with that. So I knew the ins and outs of like how recipes work and the different cooking techniques, making sure that that's successful there.
Wow, that's fascinating. Now, have you always had a passion for food and for cooking?
Yeah. So growing up, in middle school, everyone takes home economics, and that's what introduced my love for cooking. And just like I would always collect recipes and hang on to them, and then I would make them. So I've always loved food since at least middle school, if not before then. So it's always been a part of me throughout, high school and college as well.
The thing that's fascinating about this for me is that there's the artistic side of it where you do see the visual image of the food. But do you start from that as a perspective, or how do you gain inspiration for the recipes and the food that you do create?
So there's definitely a couple ways I approach it. The first way is my point of view for my blog is recipes for two and small batch baking. So I look to see, okay, what recipes are people looking for? I do a lot of like 6-inch small cakes. So I may look and see, okay, there's no recipe for this type of cake. So I'll focus on that. From a more creative standpoint, if I see a really cool styling photo in a magazine or something that says, oh, that looks really cool, I want to try that myself, then I kind of think, okay, what recipe will look great with this type of styling?
So going away from the food a little bit, you mentioned the other one of your other passions outside of just photographing food is photography in general. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into the photography thing and where you really kind of started with that?
Sure. So to start at the very beginning, my whole entire life, I've always taken pictures. Like even in like elementary school, I would have one of those disposable cameras. If I go on a field trip or even like family vacation, I'm always taking photos. So it's always been with me. But as far as actually getting started with City Life Adventures, when I worked from home, I was behind my computer a lot, or, I was, in the kitchen a lot. And it's like, okay, I need a break. And I would go out every night and take a walk. And I would walk. I started out with the river trail along North Shore. And if you've never been there before, you could see a lot of the city there. So I would just walk along like, oh, this looks really cool. And I would take a quick picture on my phone and, kind of grew from there. And now I walk around with my camera now, but at the time it started out on my phone. And it's just like, I had all these photos. I can't really share them on my food account. So I decided to separate them. And I started City Life Adventures in 2016 as far as posting on Instagram to share with everyone.
they're great images, but they're also great images of Pittsburgh. And that's one of the things that we always find fascinating here as well is just how much the city itself kind of ties in to that creation process. Can you talk a little bit about what the city means to you in terms of your art? Like, what are some things that maybe that you pick up on, or how does the city inform your kind of aesthetic?
Sure. One thing I'm known for are puddle reflections. As the name states, if I see a rain puddle, you can get low to the ground, to the puddle, and stick your lens near it, and it'll reflect the scene in front of you. And so I've kind of started that for fun. I'm like, hey, look at this cool thing. And now I'm known for it. So anytime I'm walking around, and it doesn't have to be puddles, it can be like window reflections, shiny tables, anything that reflects. I walk around and kind of keep in the back of my mind, okay, is there like a puddle here? Is there anything reflective that I can have fun and create with that?
Do you ever find spots that you see a puddle or you see something really cool and like, oh, I'll come back and when the light's right and I'll do this? I mean, are there certain puddles or reflections that inspire you that that you've come back to?
Like if it's completely dry, but I think it'd make a cool puddle. Like for example, I was trying to get the Monongahela incline reflection. And that one's a little tricky because the PJ Artleway is sloped. So when it rains, you can imagine rain doesn't stay. But when the snow melted, I was able to get puddles from the melting snow because they kind of like sat there a little bit because they were in the snow. So I was able to finally come back to that shot and get a puddle of that. So I do have a long list of puddles that I think would work. And I would have to wait for the right opportunity, the right storm, the right conditions.
Now, I always find it fascinating that, certain creators have like checklists, like, oh, this is it. Do you find yourself like writing down ideas sometimes, or do you journal or do anything like that?
Yes, I do write down a couple lists. For example, when it snows, and when the snow actually like stays on the ground, it looks pretty.
Yeah, right.
I have a shot list for that because only have a certain amount of time to go out and capture those scenes. So I have a list for that. I have a list for puddle shots. I have a list for sunsets spots as well.
As you travel in different cities and you travel in Pittsburgh specifically, I know there's always like those iconic views, and to kind of look away from those iconic views at a puddle to see the reflection back in it is, I just think it's kind of it's a different perspective, and I really appreciate that. They're really really cool images and really fun to look at. Let's take a quick break to talk about this podcast and how you can support our endeavors to showcase Pittsburgh's creators. The Pittsburgh Creators Podcast is supported by the Pittsburgh Creators Project. You can learn more at www.pittsburghcreators.org. Reach out through our website for more information about how you can sponsor an episode and keep hearing from creatives in Pittsburgh. If you know a creator we should speak to, let us know. Back to the interview. Coming out of school, did you have any apprehension about that? Because I know a lot of times it can be a little bit intimidating. But at the same time, it's like it's something, it's our art, it's our craft, it's the things that we love, and we want to integrate. Did you have any of those fears coming out of the academic environment? And like, what's some advice maybe that you could give to somebody that wants to pursue a route similar to this?
Yeah, I did have a little bit of a hesitation. After college, I did work 4 years as a videographer for a company,
Okay.
but towards the end of that, I realized this wasn't the path for me. I wasn't happy.
Right.
And at the time, I had a couple of food clients, and it was just one of those things where, and another thing too, when I had that job, I lived in the middle of Pennsylvania. I lived in the middle of nowhere, really tiny, like country town. And so I wanted to move back to Pittsburgh. And as much as I tried looking for a job prior to moving, it just wasn't working out. So I said, I have a couple clients. Let me move back to Pittsburgh, give it 6 months, a year. And if it's not doing great, then I'll go and, do the job search again. But fortunately for me, it worked out, it just kept building and building. So I definitely had hesitation with that, but it just reached the point where I just couldn't live the way I was living anymore.
How do you reach your clients in terms of your food clients? Are they like individuals? Are they businesses who are wanting to develop a recipe or looking for outside inspiration, or are they looking for marketing and commercial materials? Like how does that work? I'm fascinated by that.
So it's mostly food brands that reach out to me. Now I focus on recipes.
Uh-huh.
So I focus on, okay, here's an ingredient, make a recipe with this ingredient.
Yeah.
My latest one is a burger. It's a burger company. So, hey, here's this burger patty. Please make a recipe using our burger patty. And I develop it and shot it for them, and they're going to post it on their website so their consumers can make my recipe with their burger.
What are some of your favorite ingredients or inspirations as far as the food recipes? I'm sure everyone has like their go-to, like this is my food. This is where I feel most at home eating. What's that for you?
For me, it's baking. Anytime I can do desserts for a client, that's definitely my strong wheelhouse. I've always been fascinated with baking, like ever since I was little. I'd rather bake than make dinner. So definitely anything involving desserts is definitely what excites me the most.
So you've got a lot of things going on. You have all of your cooking stuff and recipe preparation and everything else, and you have all of your adventures and your city life adventures. How do you stay fresh with everything? How do you stay inspired to continue to do the work?
So one of my favorite things to do is take the day off, even if it's for a few hours on like a Friday afternoon. I like to go to like the different museums or like Phipps Conservatory. I have memberships to them. I'm a huge coffee drinker. So what I like to do is go out for a cup of coffee. Now that we can sit, back inside restaurants again, and have a drink, a cup of coffee, and then go to the museum. I don't have any intention of taking photos, but if I feel inspired, I may take a couple quick pics, and just kind of like take the afternoon off and just like not really worry about taking the best photo or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. And again, it's really interesting. I've heard several people say this too, that you need to take time for yourself and learn yourself before you can create for someone else or to put something out there. I think that's really great advice. For any of our listeners that are looking for inspiration or trying to continue on with creating, what are some words of wisdom that you could give them?
This is going to sound cheesy, but definitely stay true to who you are. Whenever I first started out, I was working for someone else. I was not happy with how my life was. So like, make sure you're doing what makes you happy. Make sure you take a break. Like, I know, time is we all, never seem to have enough time, but just make sure, even if for a couple hours for afternoon, make sure you take a break. Make sure you also set office hours. Don't be working, 24/7. For me, I work during the day and I don't work in the evenings. So find the schedule that works best for you and stick to those office hours.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and talking with us this afternoon. It was an absolute pleasure to hear about your work and how you've taken these multiple loves and put everything together in kind of like a new recipe and created uh, the blog and all of the things that you do with food. I just think it's fascinating, and I want to let you know that we really appreciate your work and thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast.
The Pittsburgh Creators Podcast is supported by the Pittsburgh Creators Project. You can learn more at www.pittsburghcreators.org. If you know a creator we should speak to, let us know by reaching out to us through our website. The podcast is produced and theme composed by Robert Traw. Special thanks to Greta Ziwi and Jesse Noss of Red Cayman Studios here in Pittsburgh for their post-production work. I'm Alan Fear. We'll see you next time.